You're listening to Breaking New Ground. In this podcast, we provide thought-provoking conversations for those looking to begin or advance their entrepreneurial real estate goals.
Together, we'll venture into the world of commercial real estate with entrepreneurs who challenge the status quo, building innovative paths with bold approaches.
We're your hosts. I'm John Pugh, a real estate developer and investor.
And I'm Rachel Walters, a real estate marketing expert. Throughout our episodes, we'll bring in real estate trailblazers, creating a space for inspiring conversations surrounding commercial real estate.
Pugh Management is proud to sponsor the podcast Breaking New Ground. Pugh Management is a premier developer for mixed-use, multifamily, and industrial properties. We love to develop places to live, work, and play. Pugh Management partners with family offices and institutional investors on projects in New England and Central Florida. Check us out online at pughmgmt.com.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Breaking New Ground. John and I are going to take a little break from interviewing entrepreneurs to bring our discussion that we have on our weekly calls with everyone and talk about things that are happening currently in the economy, happening in commercial real estate. We're seeing a lot of different headlines, and that's why we get together and discuss what's going on. I know John meets with a lot of people. I do, to know, what's behind these headlines. And so we just wanted to share that discussion with you and bring up things that are timely right now.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a great introduction, Rachel. I think you and I connect at least once a week and discuss kind of what's happening and who we've been talking to in the industry and some of the different things that we're seeing. And it's pretty clear that there's a lot of challenges out there right now. And I think we're all kind of trying to deal with it in different ways. And I think, we were just chatting a minute ago. I think it's kind of clear that we're in there's the discussion by the economic pundits, whether we're in a recession or not, but we're clearly in some type of economic slowdown of some sort. And if you just look at the Wall Street Journal headlines for commercial real estate, it's a who's who in kind of negative headlines. Surge in commercial property foreclosures suggests a bottom is near. That's actually rather hopeful. Let's see. San Francisco is sinking in bad hotel debt. Sharp drop off in visitors since before the pandemic is squeezing the city's hospitality sector. Eviction surge in major cities in the American Sun Belt. Property fraud allegations snowball as commercial real estate values fall. So those are all headlines, which is a lot of negative headlines, and for good reason. There's been a lot of challenges in our industry the last year and a half, 2 years now. We're all dealing with this in different ways and seeing kind of different challenges. And I think that's really what we want to touch on today, is just kind of have a conversation about what we're seeing and some of the different ways that people are dealing with them in a positive way, and engaging with kind of different, taking different angles and taking a different course sometimes with certain things. So those are the headlines. Just in terms of deal flow, we were discussing earlier, there is deal flow. There are transactions that are happening. My understanding is that, owner users are still in the market buying because they need space for their businesses. And there are some developers making some deals happen. There are some shovels going into the ground still. But there's a notable lack of cranes on the skyline here in Tampa, Florida, as well as in Boston, where I was recently. And I just recently drove the East Coast from Maine all the way down to Tampa, Florida, and there's a litany of for sale signs for commercial property, for land. Kind of everywhere you look, there's something that's for sale. So clearly, it's shifted dramatically from 2 years ago, where it was a seller's market. Now it's certainly a buyer's market. That being said, prices haven't come down. They haven't come down dramatically in a lot of cases. It's kind of an uneven distribution of price adjustments, and I think that's an interesting piece or jumping off point to talk about a little bit. But office is getting slammed. That's a big headline, and I do think that's fairly true. My understanding is that most lenders have no interest in lending on office today, just because of the huge amount of risk. I was just reading before we got on the call. I was reading about a building in Boston, Massachusetts, that sold for $40 million in way back in 2010, and it just sold for $7.8 million. It was like I want to say it was 150,000 square foot building. So that's a pretty dramatic drop in price. That's just an example of kind of what we're discussing. There are other, buildings that, have held up a bit better. Certainly the suburbs, my understanding is the suburban office market's still doing fairly well, certainly the Class A product. But that's a place that I personally don't spend a lot of time, but it's something I've been observing, and it's pretty fascinating to watch. Multifamily, from what I've seen, is somewhat stable, given the fact that there's the rents have, my understanding is rents have fallen a bit as of the last year or so, but not to the extent that it's forcing the fire sales that are happening in the office market. I predict that there will be some of that occurring in the next 2 years, because there's still product that's being delivered right now that's been under construction. Started construction maybe in 2023 or late 22. Those are typically 2-year projects. So I think we're in a position where some of those are in lease up right now, and they're probably struggling. I'm not currently building anything. We have been leasing an industrial building that was built. We completed in about a year ago, and that has had a lot of interest from potential tenants, but no takers thus far. That's about 100,000 square foot urban last mile building. That's been interesting to watch, because it was Class A building with very little Class A product around it, so we expected it to lease up pretty quickly, but it hasn't happened as of yet. So the economy's we're kind of struggling in the economy, and I think there's hope that there's the term survive until 25, and that's been something that people have been trying to hang their hat on, but. And I think there will be some opportunities certainly in 25, but it's not clear that that's going to be this, renaissance, let's call it. It's not going to be 2019 all over again, unfortunately, for people. But I also think it's a good thing, right? It has to reset. You were saying earlier, Rachel, that it's a cyclical business, and we have to have natural resets. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, it is interesting, and why we want to talk all the time to see, what's clickbait headline, right? Like, that's a real thing. I know people at the Business Journal in commercial real estate who had to have a certain amount of clicks a month. So they would add,
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they would add,
oh, gosh.
Someone
Makes
selling
sense.
their house with images, and then that would hit the click. So it is a legit thing. Like,
Interesting.
all papers, all media right now they want eyeballs. So, those headlines are scary. And I think, not that it's not, but really digging in, and like you said, driving, being at the sites, talking to the brokers on the ground, talking to the developers on the ground, the consultants, is huge, because I feel like it's just also very nuanced. Like, we were reading an article, and, someone can say, like, well, all of San Francisco's dead. All of San Francisco's office is doom. It's all crime. It's all closed. All the tech is at home. But there is an increase in AI companies leasing, and there is, Class A office is doing okay. And so, not that we're saying that's an amazing market, go there, find new opportunities, but it's just one example of, like, now in the time we're at, you really have to do a lot of due diligence. You really need to talk to consultants. You need to be on the ground. Like, you just can't take anything, as like over sweeping, like looking at macro economics right now on a deal, I'm here on the East Coast of Florida, and there's a lot of multifamily going up. And, people are starting to leave the Miami-Dade area. It's starting to show, not just anecdotally, but like in statistics. There's a lot of products still coming out. There's a lot of issues with condos. So to say like, oh, Southeast multifamily is perfect, like some areas maybe, and at some price points, and maybe some of the newer product, but it's all like very nuanced right now.
Yeah. Well, I think to that point, similar to the stock market, which is there's a handful of big winners and there's a lot of losers. And if you are really good at picking stocks right now, you can make a good amount of money. If you're not so good, you'll hopefully you'll break even. But I think that just speaks to the volatility that we're experiencing in the market just across the board, whatever the asset type might be. And the geography is absolutely, I mean, I witnessed it, spent some time here in Tampa last year, and then was spent some time in Boston as well recently in the spring. And the conversation was just very, very different. Extremely stable multifamily market in Boston where, cap rates are still, I don't know, 5.5%. And, a place like Tampa, they're 6.5, 7%. And that might sound like a lot to those who are not developing property, but it's a heck of a lot of value. So there's just this haves and have not situation, and you have to be very careful where you put your money. And but in the end, it's a good thing, right? It's what capitalism is all about. It's creative destruction, and those who are wasteful and are just spraying money around, they end up losing their money. That's just how it works, right? I think it's a good thing to wash some people out of the market, because that's what drove prices up so ridiculously high, and that's what will bring them back down and create some opportunities for all of us. So I'm excited about it. I don't know about you, but that being said, there's a lot of challenges for some of our colleagues in the market. I've had a couple conversations in the last couple of months with friends who are, looking for new opportunities, that are either development managers, construction managers, senior people that are either mid-level, they're, kind of mid-level managers, or people that are executives that have been started looking for new opportunities. And it's, I would say it's a challenge. I mean, I think it's a challenge. There's definitely, what I've observed is a lot of the real estate firms that I know, they've been trying to hold on to their best employees for a long time, as long as they can, because they know that rehiring and training people is a challenge. So I don't know how many opportunities are opening up. I did just connect to a friend of mine with a construction company, and he's a construction management executive. And I was happened to be on LinkedIn earlier, and I noticed a friend of mine is hiring for kind of a very senior construction job, and just connected the two of them. So there are some opportunities like that. But it's not across the board. Certainly not across the board hiring or firing. But there has been a fair amount of layoffs in technology, especially lately. So it's been. I think the sentiment is going south, just as an anecdotal observation over the last, probably year to date, last 8 months. I think there was some amount of hope at the beginning of the year that things would rebound and turn around when the Fed started cutting. And I think there's some reality that's starting to sink in, and firms are starting to make hard decisions because they may or may not be able to deploy capital the way they wanted to. I had another conversation with a friend of mine who knows a chief investment officer at a large development investment company, and they were saying, that they need to put money to work. They really need to put money to work, and they're looking for returns that are half of what they were 2-3 years ago, and they just need to put that money out the door so they can keep the money and continue managing those investments, and obviously generate value for people. But it's a different type of mentality than it was a couple years ago, and that's pretty dramatic shift. But
I think like you and I have worked in development in coming out of the last recession, or during the last recession. So we've seen it, but I think it's not as obvious to people who are younger or newer and who were very lucky, but I guess now unlucky because they didn't learn the lessons to be in commercial real estate, during this very long period of prosperity, right? And
Well,
so,
it was a golden age. It was a golden age.
yeah. But we know, from the last recession that construction companies, architecture companies, all of these vendors, for the best they can do, even if they, have the best culture and the, best employees, like this is very cyclical and it happens every time. Like this isn't something new for this economy. It is something that if big projects are put on hold or new projects aren't coming out of the ground, like you said, like you don't need as many people. And those are the consultants and vendors that get hit hard and they, gear up a ton during construction. Obviously, the construction companies and the team members, but when you're not building, you can't pay people to sit there. So, having that like knowledge of this is cyclical and like what other things can you do around that? Like, what can you invest in? What can you upskill your skill set in? Like, maybe should you move to medical or university and, different situations like that? Should you start your own business and, realize like you're very early and like maybe you could, start a deal. But it's definitely something also, when we talk about people that are over leveraged, right? Like you don't want to be in that situation. And now we're seeing those people getting caught. Some fraudulent, some just not having what they, said they had, unfortunately. And so I think now also is a time to look at your mental health, to look at your skill set. We have time, right? Like you can sit at the office 60 to 80 hours a week if you want and look for deals and look for things, but most likely you're not going to get any further. And the summer is notoriously slow in almost any economy for commercial real estate. And so, you and I both have been talking about, we've been on vacation, we've spent time with our family, we've been working on our podcast, working on different skill sets, looking at marketing, looking at technology. And so I know that's also something we want to talk to people about is, if you can't get the same amount of deals done, maybe you need a little break. Maybe you've been sitting at your desk for so long and you need to lose that COVID weight or, that you want to get outside and be healthy. Like do that now, because when opportunities come or when you get that project that you can dive into, you want to be in a good mindset. And if you're just sitting there reading these headlines and just, wallowing in this and not improving your skills or improving your health, it's a really missed opportunity right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's such an important point, and I think we all as real estate professionals need to be aware of and to be self-aware of kind of where we're at in our journey. Some people in their journey, maybe it makes more sense to gain some education. I posted something about skill stacking earlier today, and I feel like that to me is such an important thing to think about and just to kind of keep on your radar, because I mean, effectively, like I'm a real estate developer because I spent, 10 years skill stacking, right? Which is finance, understanding how investments work, understanding how buildings get built, how they go together, working in construction. And I think people that want to advance themselves just, need to find this is the time to do it. Like, when you're super busy, it's not the right time. So recognize it's the time and go do that. I think it's a great thing to be able to do. And then you made the point about starting a business. Like this is as silly as it sounds. I feel like it sounds silly because it's a bad economy. Everyone's got to hunker down, but like it really it is the best time to start. All the best companies have started in recessions. If you look at them in the last 20 years, and mostly speaking about technology, but like all the big companies that have had a lot of success were. And the reason is because people can give themselves kind of somewhat lower their expectations, focus on building something, build it long enough, you get that runway long enough to actually get it off the ground. I think it's absolutely the right time. And in specific to real estate, like when deals start falling apart, that's when the opportunities arise. And if you really want to do something, you got to have, obviously you have to have some amount of financial stability to be able to do that. Maybe it's a side gig. I don't know, however you want to kind of set it up, but going after something that may not have been available to you, 2 years ago, I think it's a great time to do that. So it's exciting time. There is pain involved with it, unfortunately, for a lot of people, investors, employees, and those that take the bull by the horns and look at it as an opportunity will advance, and those that don't, unfortunately, won't. So I don't know. I really hope our followers, our listeners, get out there and go do something new, do something different, try something new. Talk to somebody you haven't spoken to before, meet new people, stay positive. I think that's just such an important part of our message, because that energy, that activity will generate more opportunities for you, right? That to me is such an important message. Anyone in the entrepreneurial space, needs to understand that activity generates opportunity. So, So I don't know. Were there a couple other things we want to touch on? I think the professional education improvement is just so important, and then patience. Like we were talking about earlier. Like patience is key, because those that jump ship and go chase the newest thing, you can't jump from industry to industry. That's just the reality. You can't go, oh, I'm going to go do, I'm going to go make pizzas or whatever, right? I'm going to have a pizza shop. Like if you want to be a real estate professional, you have to have patience and build, kind of do that skill stacking and build that professional education, so that you have the opportunity to connect with others and provide. Really, it's so much of what we do is about creating value for other people. It's looking to create value for other people. And I think if you're patient and if you look to connect and look to help people, you get there. You get there eventually. So
yeah, we are at a different speed right now, right? Like there is no warp speed. So I do get that, like in your life, if you think of it, like a ladder, I know it can be frustrating because you're like, I was on this, ladder, elevator going up, up, up. But it is really true. Like, and hopefully we can have some of these entrepreneurs on. But coming out of the last recession, there were people who had very cushy jobs in large commercial real estate companies that were all laid off, and who have gone on to now have some of the largest companies that people have probably no memory of them being, that quote unquote small. They all had to take huge pay cuts, but the reward of years of hard work after working at a discount, to people who were like mid-career, midlife, right? Like this isn't like, oh, you're 20. So, I think that's also what we want to show as we start to, interview some of these more established entrepreneurs is that, there's the like shiny highlights of their biography, but there were definitely times because of the cycles where, they got knocked down a few rungs, but then what they built out of these stalled opportunities or opportunities that people who never wanted to be entrepreneurs, but were forced in the last recession. So, we just want people to realize like, you might be making less this year. You might be spending a lot of time, reading and looking at trends and working on your skills, but, it will pay off it's not, there's not immediate ROIs right now.
That's right. That's right. We got to play the long game, right? You got to play the long game, and I think it is a great time to reflect on kind of where you are and where you want to be. I think that helps when you have that long-term vision. It gives you something to aim at, and allow. To some extent, it's kind of a calming thing because you're not saying to yourself, tomorrow I'm going to be successful. You're saying to yourself, this is where I want to be. And then you just keep putting one foot in front of the other. It's kind of like running a marathon. I've
Definitely.
only ever run a half marathon because I'm just, I don't know if that's something I'm meant to do, but when you run a half marathon, when you run a distance, there's some amount of doubt that you have, but you just kind of push through it and you keep going. And at some point you get where you're going, but so much of it is just turns into putting one foot in front of the other and not stopping. There was an interesting post, I think it was on Twitter yesterday, and it was just about consistency, right? Like if you consistently show up. Oh, you know who it was? It was Tom Brady. There's a Tom Brady speech circulate a little bit, and I think he was like presenting. He was either, I don't know where he was, but I think he was like presenting at a college or something, and he was just talking about like the difference between those who succeed and those who fail is that they consistently show up, and that was it. They just can keep showing up, and once if you fall down, if you don't fall down, if you fall sideways, if you get into a place where you didn't expect to be, you just keep showing up. And that's, I think, to me, to some extent, like that's what I've kind of learned over my career is you just keep showing up and doing the same thing, and people recognize that you have value because you've accumulated knowledge doing the same thing for a long time. And I think that's just such a great message to anybody who's an entrepreneur or who maybe has been laid off or maybe is looking at a different opportunity, a new opportunity. It's just using what you have to build on that and create opportunities for yourself because they're there and they might not be there today. I got laid off. I think I've talked to you about this before. I got laid off from a development job, and 2 months later, I got introduced to a business partner of mine who I've been business partners with ever since. And it was super hard. I was always like, at least I thought I was. I was always like an all-star guy and, always a top performer kind of person. And it was kind of a shock, to get laid off. And then suddenly, I'm out there talking about what I want to do to people in the market. And next thing you know, I got introduced to a great business partner. So I think, just understanding that you can drive what you want. If you just keep going towards it, you'll get there. So
that
yeah,
should be our final parting words, but I'm going to keep going. It's just such a good reminder for everyone. And I think I did see that circulating also. And, and there's a lot of ego, even when you think you don't have one, right? Like if you work for a big company, if you were doing awesome, if you were making a lot of money, not even talking about like you were being like a crazy social influencer, just like you felt accomplished. It is really tough on your ego to be let go because of the economy. And it's nothing on you. It's projects are stalled, people are being let go.
Cycle.
It's happened to the best of us, to the best people in commercial real estate. I heard a podcast that Barry Sternlicht, like the reason he started his is because he was laid off, which I never knew. Who talks about that anymore? He's so successful. So, but it is that showing up also, because you have this like imposter syndrome. You have this like you're hard on yourself. You have comparison of, well, last year I sold this many projects or I built this many projects. And then you're like, wow, I have one, or I have none. And it is really hard to just keep going. And, you can just keep that forward momentum. If you just show up at events, you just have a conversation with people, the immediate ROI, and even 2 months is pretty good, but like maybe you talk to someone a couple years ago and, a year from now they reach out to you with an opportunity. And so like, for 2 years,
Yep.
you're like, what was the ROI of going to that conference, or, having these conversations or talking about these new ideas with people, but you really
Yep.
don't know. And you're right. Like, just move forward, even if it seems like a tiny step. Just go to the event and show your face, even if you're like, I don't work for this big fancy company anymore. I don't even know what I'm doing with myself. Like, just show up and be there,
Yeah.
and, be
Yeah.
meeting people, have conversations, and, be
Sure.
open to like something that sounds really weird and maybe odd and scary, but could be the
Mhm.
next big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the hardest thing after I went my separate ways with that big company. It was hard to show up at networking events because wasn't associated with any company. It was associated with my
Yeah.
whatever little, I called it a company, it wasn't a company, right? And so that was really hard, because you want to be associated with a group that's successful or a group that's doing something exciting and interesting. And when you don't have that, yeah, it's a challenging thing. You kind of have to get past, and it did take me a little while to get past it. At some point, I re-engaged, but it was yeah, it was something else. But I think that's an important point. You have to kind of push past that, and recognize that people, as much as industry events sometimes feel like kind of networking socials where people are kind of just being friendly to be friendly because it's an industry thing. Sometimes there's that, you kind of get that feeling, or not always, but some people are kind of fake at these industry events, right? But the reality is there's people there that care about you and they're your friends, and they enjoy seeing you and spending time with you. And it doesn't matter who you're associated with; they're just good people, and they're happy to help if they know about something. And that's to me the community that I've always appreciated, and I'd love to be able to keep growing that with you. I think we're building our community, and I think it's important to be supportive of everybody that's a part of our community. So reach out to Rachel and I if you want to connect and have a conversation, and let's talk.
Yeah. And come to our events, because there will not be people who care what company you're with. They care that you're
Yeah,
there, you have the energy. Like,
that's
I
right.
always say, if you're going to, like, the quality of the people at events and at my event, like, there are people who are
Hmm.
there to network, help, engage. Like, don't
Yep.
come to a networking event and be like, I don't want to talk to anyone. Like, why are you there? And I think you and I are really trying to spend time with the people that are willing to have a conversation with someone, willing to hear out an idea. And those
Yep.
are the type of people we want to bring together to find new opportunities together.
Yeah. Well, that, and look for ways in which you can help. Don't go walking around looking for ways in which somebody you can get paid. I think that's the biggest challenge with people at social networking events, is that they see somebody who's really influential and successful. They want to go running up to them and talk their ear off. 9 times out of 10, that person doesn't really want to talk to you, and they're just there doing whatever they're doing. The better opportunities are building meaningful relationships through conversations about things that people care about. You have shared priorities or interests, then you're going to build a real relationship. You're not going to just run up to some important person and somehow get your ear. And like, I've always had this kind of like aversion to that. I've of course approached a speaker a handful of times, but like there's just this like weird idea that I'm going to go talk to this successful person and everything's going to be great, and like that's not really, 9 times out of 10 that doesn't really pan out. I think it's better to focus on how can I, who is the person that's standing in front of me. Don't look over my shoulder while you're talking to me. And how can I maybe help this person, or who can I introduce this person to? Because that to me is where you are an authentic, genuine person, as opposed to somebody trying to make a buck, right? And I think that that's really meaningful and valuable over time. That's playing the long game too, right? So,
Yeah. Exactly. And
our
we're always trying to build, and, people in our network who aren't just reaching out to us just for, a job opportunity, but people who are in our network and who share ideas and are willing to hear others. Like, we're always trying to connect people with either, as much advice as we can give for what we've gone through. And then, if there are any opportunities that we see, we want to match people in our network, or, if a startup
Absolutely.
is hiring, or a small company, we want to make sure they have great people. So yeah,
Definitely.
we are always looking to help people in that way.
All right. Well, thank you for joining the conversation, everybody that's listening and watching. Really look forward to the next one. And Rachel, thanks for another great conversation, and look forward to our next conversation with a new guest.
Absolutely. Thanks, John.
We want to hear your thoughts and feedback on today's episode, and what topics you would like us to discuss in future episodes.
Follow us on Spotify to be notified when our next episode is live. To connect with John and I, follow us on LinkedIn.
Thanks for joining us today on Breaking New Ground.